I see it over and over again, guys who have been approaching girls and trying to learn this stuff for a year, 5 years, even 10 years. They get to a certain kind of middling level, they plateau, and they never really get any better from there. Or if they do, their progress is insanely slow. On the other hand, I see a few guys who skyrocket to success what seems like instantaneously. They're getting better every single week, and they're reaching mastery levels within a year or less. How is it possible that they're getting there so much faster than everywhere else? Well, over years and years of coaching, I've seen the same pattern over and over again. It's a very simple difference between the outlier successful guys and the typical guys in mediocrity, and the secret isn't what you'd think. In this video, I'm going to teach you the secret to going from mediocre with women in dating to world class. And I know that sounds like a big claim, but I'm basing this on 20 years of experience seeing guys go through this journey over and over again. And interestingly enough, it's not so much something you have to learn, it's something you need to unlearn. Let's talk about that right now. As we start off talking about this journey to mastery, I want to share with you an experience that I've had over and over again over the years on my bootcamp programs. So much so that I now warn students about this on day one because it's so predictably going to happen. And the phenomenon is this. If someone has an amazing first night of the bootcamp, there is an incredible correlation between that amazing first night and a really rough second day or second night. And there's a very clear reason for this. When a student first comes into the boot camp, they're in a lot of ways a blank slate. They're very ready to learn. They're very wide-eyed and willing to listen and try anything. But if on that first night they do really, really well and then they go home and go to sleep, now they're going to start to oftentimes form an identity around the fact that they did well. They'll go home thinking, oh shit, I got this girl thing sorted out. Or I did really well last night, hopefully I'll do as well again the next day. And so now instead of just coming in with the idea of, I'm an open vessel, I want to learn as much as I can, they're coming in with this idea of, I need to live up to something. I want to match up to something. I am good. I like the fact that I feel this way about myself. All of those things make them much more outcome dependent day two, and outcome dependence in game is a recipe for doing really, really poorly. So it's to the point where before we even do day one, I warn students, I'm telling you about this right now so that when I warn you about it on day two, you'll know I'm not making it up then. You'll know that this is something that happens often, and this is something we have to guard against. We have to guard against your ego. We have to guard against that sort of complacency. We have to guard against taking things for granted. And mostly, we have to keep you in that mindset where you're prepared to learn as your primary goal. And even with this warning up front, it's very common. I'll see a student who comes in with no experience, literally has never done an approach in his life, and by the end of the boot camp, he'll be doing better than someone who's been in game for weeks, months, or even years. And this is because that student who came in completely raw has nothing to lose. He truly is an open vessel to learning, and throughout the entire boot camp, he literally does what the fuck I say, exactly to the letter, exactly how I say it, and he's ready to learn. In short, he has the mindset that he's a beginner with lots to learn, as opposed to the mindset that he has something to prove or that he already knows something that he needs to hang on to or be attached to. While I think that example I just gave illustrates the general idea well, it is very particular to guys on a coaching program. But let me show you how this same mental issue comes up over and over again at every stage in learning game. First, let's address the question of why very few guys ever actually figure out game as a thing or actually get into learning game in the first place. For a lot of guys, they got a little bit of success with women at some point in their life. Not a lot, not something they're actually happy with, but just enough to keep them vaguely satisfied. And from that success, they have some kind of a model of something they think works, and they don't want to violate that model. They don't want to threaten that model or test that model. And so for them to understand that game is a thing, to understand that it's possible to learn game as a skill, that would mean getting rid of the thing that they think has worked for them in the past. It would mean challenging their ego and asking themselves, oh shit, maybe this is something I should have been doing the whole time. Oh shit, maybe I'm actually not that good, and that could potentially hurt. And so this ego-protecting behavior of trying to stick with what they've done before, stick with what has worked, stick with their current identity of self, it precludes them learning game. So ironically, a lot of guys get into game because they're terrible with women, but through doing game become excellent with women. A lot of guys who have way more inherent talent, way more natural charisma, way more natural charm, way more early success with women don't get into game, and they're surpassed by the guys who, in theory, should not be as good as they are. So that example deals with guys not even getting into game in the first place. What about guys who have been in game for a while? Well, the second phenomenon I want to address to you is the phenomenon of what I call intermediate approach anxiety. We're all generally familiar with beginner approach anxiety. That's when you have no experience approaching, you've never done it successfully, you don't even really believe it can happen for you. And so when you're looking at an approach, you think about the chances of success, the chance of failure, and the chance of failure seems like almost 100%. Chance of success seems like almost 0%. And so your brain says, I don't want to do that. That's a risk with almost no reward, and you're not really motivated to go. The motivation to go versus the fear of going, the fear wins out. But what happens for a lot of guys is after they've overcome beginner approach anxiety, they've done a lot of approaches, they've even gotten some results, they've gotten phone numbers, they've gotten dates, even had girlfriends from cold approach, then at that point, all of a sudden, they develop a new sort of approach anxiety. And that new approach anxiety comes from their ego. It comes from their self-perception. It comes actually because they've had past success. And now what's happening is they know that if they do enough reps, they can get an approach that goes a certain amount good. Like they can get a certain amount of phone numbers. But deep down, they know that a lot of the phone numbers are going to flake. It's going to be a lot of work. And do they really want to put on all that effort? Or even they'll get phone numbers and then they won't want to follow up on the phone number because the phone number feels good to them, but following up on the phone number and getting a flake feels bad to them, so they'll stop themselves there. They'll stop themselves from doing an approach because they know whatever approach they do is not going to be better than some approach they've done before, so it doesn't feel like a win to them anymore. They won't follow up with their number because getting the number felt like a win. When it flakes, it feels like a loss. And so now they're attaching their ego, they're attaching their self-identity to whether or not they succeed at game. And because the threshold for success has been elevated for them, it no longer feels like a win. If they still have the same threshold of success as they had at a beginner, which is if I just approach, it's a win. If she just smiles at me, it's a win. If I get a phone number, it's a huge win. If that was their threshold for success, they would actually have no problem approaching. They'd be massively motivated to approach. But because their threshold of what they consider success has increased, now the balance of success and failure, they look at the proposition, they say, oh, it's more likely to be a failure than a success. And again, they're no longer motivated to do it. Let's look at another intermediate phenomenon, and this is the concept of what I call leveling. If this is a new phenomenon for you, here's the general idea. As you're learning game, you figure something out that kind of works. And maybe it's not the perfect move, but it gets you through a certain circumstance. It teaches you how to get a number. It teaches you how to get through an approach. It teaches you how to get seated with a girl, something like that. And again, it may not be perfect. It may be clunky. It may be awkward. It may have all kinds of problems, but it has worked for you. And because it's worked for you, you're like, this is my solution. I'm going to keep doing it because it has worked. And the problem is, while this thing may work to a point, it is flawed oftentimes, and there are better solutions. So because you come up with one solution and you're stuck with it, you're refusing to discard that solution and try something new to come up with a better solution because you don't want the failures that will occur in that learning process. You don't want to fail in order to learn. You want to hang on to whatever has worked for you in the past. And so guys at intermediate become very attached to doing game in one particular style with a certain set of crutches, a certain set of like shtick type of routines, and they're limited by what they came up with before because they're afraid to try something new. They're afraid to fail in order to learn something that might be better than what they're currently doing. Now let's look at an advanced case study using me as the subject of the study. So I've personally been doing game since the year 2000. I've been teaching game since 2004 at what would probably be considered the highest level of teaching game. So that means for 20 years, I've been teaching game at a very high level. Throughout those 20 years, the style of game that is kind of in vogue, the new ideas that are established in game have changed over time. So the way game looked in 2004, the way it looks in 2024 are dramatically different, and there have been a variety of shifts over that time. Each time when a new style of game emerged, I was already established in the older style of game and getting really good results with it. I was already getting results that were admirable and that you would want doing the old type of game. However, something I will say that I've always done to my own credit is when a new style of game has emerged, I've always been willing to pause what I'm doing, look at that new style of game and experiment with it and practice it. What I've actually kind of done is I've tried to create a time capsule of my current style of game, figure out everything I'm doing, codify it, write it down so that I can get back to it if I want to, and then go try that new style of game until I can make it work really, really well. And then at that point, I'll take whatever elements of the new style of game and incorporate them into my old style of game. Or if the new style of game is working better, I'll take some elements of my older style of game and incorporate them into the new style of game. But I'm always willing to get worse in order to learn something new. If I see something that is a new discovery, if I see something that shows a lot of promise, I'm willing to fail a bit. I'm willing to go eat shit, even though I know that I could do better. But at any point, if I see something that shows promise, if I see something that inspires me and has potential, I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to get temporarily worse in order to get long-term better. And I think that's to my credit, and that's part of the reason that I've managed to stay relevant in this industry and in game for 20 years. I want to end the examples with one kind of funny bonus example, which is another thing that happens on my boot camps. So one thing I do a lot on boot camps is we actually film students and then we break down their footage. And I'm going through, their actual interactions with a fine-tooth comb, fast forward here, rewind here, let's go over that a second time. And a thing that happens a lot is I'll see a guy who's gaming in a way that's way too safe. He's not taking risks. He's not making the interaction man to woman. He has no sort of negative polarization, negative polarity. He's just way too nice throughout. And then all of a sudden, a girl will tell him she has a boyfriend. And if he decides to stay in and continue talking to her anyway, which a lot of times guys just leave there, which is totally fine. But if he decides to stay and talk to her a little bit longer and try and push it, all of a sudden, oftentimes, I'll see really good games start to come out. All of a sudden, he'll be teasing. All of a sudden, he'll be giving her a hard time. All of a sudden, he'll loosen up and act a lot more with her like he acts with us on the rest of the boot camp, being his best, most charismatic self. And the funny thing that happened is now he has nothing to lose. Up until the moment when she said she had a boyfriend, he was playing it safe. As soon as she said she had a boyfriend, he now had nothing to lose and all his best game came out. And I look at him, I'm like, where was that beforehand? I want to see that from the first moment of the interaction. Actually, let me give you one more positive example. I'll talk about a student of mine who has done really, really well. He came in already incredibly advanced and already doing very, very well. He worked with me for a year or so and got to what I consider to be basically a world-class level. But now, even at that world-class level, even when he's getting consistent results, he constantly has this innate urge to change things up and to mess with his success and try different things out, right? So he had basically one of the best online dating profiles I've ever seen that was getting crazy, crazy results. And yet he'd come to me and be like, hey, I'm thinking about changing my profile. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? I'm like, do you really want to change it? It's working like crazy. He's like, yeah, I know, but I'm getting a little tired with it. I think I can optimize this. I think I can maybe make this better. The fact that even at an incredible level of success, even when he's already crushing it beyond almost anything I've ever seen, he's willing to change things up. And in fact, he has a desire to change things up, to get new information, to get new data, to improve himself in the long run. That's a big part of why he got good in the first place and why he continues getting better. What's the lesson from that? What's the lesson from all these examples? Well, basically, as soon as you stop treating yourself as a student, as soon as you start to think, oh, I've got it figured out, oh, I am someone, oh, I have something to lose, you will stop getting better at anywhere near the pace that you were before. You need to remember that there's always new information, always new lines, always new techniques, always new experiences. You will probably in your entire lifetime never scratch the surface of your potential in game. So no matter how good you think you are, it is a tiny fraction compared to how good you can be. And as soon as you forget that, you're going to be stuck at how good you currently are. So I want you to take that lesson. I want you to understand it. I want you to apply it to your game. One final thought for you before I close. I want you to apply this lesson, though, not just to your game, but to everything in your life. Every single thing that I have been successful at in life, using this mentality, has helped me equally as well. It's a reason why I was as good as I was at pool, at poker, at chess, at soccer, at investing. I have used this same mentality of continuing to improve, continuing to try new things, even when I was already successful, even when I had to sometimes take a step backward. That is one of the biggest things to which I attribute my own personal success, not just in game, but to everything in life. So absolutely apply this to your game, but also I would encourage you, go a step further. Ask yourself, where else in life are you letting your ego, your attachment, get in the way of maintaining that learning mindset and continuing towards excellence instead of settling for mediocrity? Thanks for watching. Appreciate being here. Keep striving for excellence, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.